Welcome back to GlowPOP Reads. The story I'm currently reading is Bendy and the Ink Machine, Dreams Come to Life by Adrian Kress. If you haven't seen the previous chapter, I suggest you listen to that before this one so you can catch up with what's going on. But if you've already done so, I hope you'll enjoy this one. Also be sure to subscribe, leave comments, and click the bell for more content. Don't forget to support me on other social media sites, and feel free to leave me a coffee as well. Links are in the description, and now, on with the story. Chapter 10. It was fun. It was. Learning from Grandpa? Sure, it was frustrating, and sure, sometimes even boring. Everything was so technical. I didn't get to draw what I wanted to, but yeah, it was also fun. And the more excited he got when I learned something new, the better. In a few days, he added more to the lessons. We were still doing circles, but moved on to lines. Lines that helped with perspective. But don't ask me how he knew that word, he just did. We drew a bunch of lines that ran beside one another to the middle of the page. Then we drew things like rectangles for buildings or cones for trees along the lines. We made them shorter as we got closer to the center of the page. And it worked. It looked like the trees were getting farther away. Pyramid, Grandpa had said. Perspective. He was pointing to a painting by Da Vinci of the Virgin Mary sitting on some rocks holding baby Jesus. I nodded. Pyramid, I said back. We kept practicing after work together, on the weekends, and during my off times at the studio I practiced too. I didn't have any more cowboy bendies to give to Miss Lambert, and I could feel her sometimes looking at me, judging me, doubting me. I really wanted to prove myself to her. Almost more in a way now than to Mr. Drew. I felt like she didn't think I had saved my job because I deserved it. I felt like she thought that Mr. Drew just liked me. A boys' club thing. I thought that because she said it once. Just the old boys' club, and not really at me, but I heard it. And thought about it. Thought about how Mr. Drew had dismissed her that day in his office. I was so confused. Which was it? Did he respect talent or not? Or maybe he did, but he was more forgiving toward people who looked like him? Who reminded him of himself? No, I didn't want to think that way. Anyway, I figured it was time to start actually doing some bendies, and had planned on asking Grandpa at home to help. I was feeling excited, and was rushing through the lobby at the end of the day, when I heard a familiar voice. Buddy! I skidded to a stop and turned. Mr. Drew was standing by the front desk, a big grin on his face. Sir, I said, shocked. I instantly made my way over to him. Where are you rushing off to so fast? Have a date? He asked with a laugh. I felt my face get hot like it did whenever people ask personal questions like that. Oh, no, sir. Don't have a sweetheart. Mr. Drew nodded at that. Probably for the best. Right now it's important for us to focus on the work. Yes, I said. I supposed. That wasn't really it, but it was also it. When would I have the time? I have something for you. Apologies for the delay, but gave you a little something extra to make up for it. He handed me a white piece of paper. I looked at it. My paycheck. My first paycheck. It'd been 3 weeks and, yeah, I guess it was late, but I'd been so wrapped up in everything going on with drawing, and lying, and then doing my best to cover up for the lying that I guess I'd kind of forgot. The reason for all of this in the first place. The money. $40. 40 whole dollars. In my hand. Hope it's enough. We never actually talked about how much Schwartz paid you. Good lesson, buddy. Always talk numbers. Always talk numbers. $40. I felt like I couldn't breathe. It's good, I managed to squeeze out. Good, replied Mr. Drew. He gave me a hearty slap on the back and I coughed. Come on, we're celebrating. We are? Without even waiting for me to say anything, he made his way to the door and I followed him outside into the blazing heat. Somehow it didn't seem totally overwhelming for once. Somehow it felt kind of good. I caught up to Mr. Drew and stepped in beside him as he walked fast along the sidewalk. Where are we going? I asked. To celebrate, he replied, grinning again. Yes, but how and where, I wanted to know. I didn't ask it again. I wasn't supposed to. I just had to trust him. And I did trust him. We walked along a couple blocks and turned south. Eventually, we came to a restaurant with a bright red awning. The word Sardi's was written on it. I think I've heard of this place, I said as we passed through the doors into the dark red interior. I should hope so, replied Mr. Drew with a laugh. Mr. Drew, usual table? Asked the host at the stand. Absolutely, replied Mr. Drew, and as he reached out to shake his hand, I noticed a flash of a dollar bill pass between them. Right this way, he said with a bright smile. We followed him through toward the back of the restaurant and to a table for two right under a wall full of caricatures of famous people. That's Sinatra, I said as I sat down. Someday, kid, that will be us, said Mr. Drew. Well, you at least, I replied. I didn't notice how Mr. Drew reacted to that. I was too wide-eyed looking around. There were drawings of famous people covering the walls everywhere, and I was pretty sure there were some actual famous people sitting at some of the booths, too. Not that I recognized them. Men in suits, women in dresses, having dinner before seeing a show. I looked up above my head at the caricatures there. I recognized Lauren Bacall. It was really neat. I didn't actually have this desire to be in one of the drawings, but the idea of having one of my drawings up there, for everyone to see, that made my stomach get excited. A waiter in a red jacket approached us. Drinks, gentlemen? Give me an old-fashioned, said Mr. Drew. Buddy? He looked at me and I could tell if I wanted to, I could have ordered the same. But I just couldn't. A soda? I asked the waiter. Coke? The waiter smiled at me like I'd just made the most perfect choice anyone had ever made before and swooped off to get our drinks. Buddy, you gotta start drinking like a man, said Mr. Drew. I have some stuff I have to do when I get home. Gotta have a clear head, I replied. I found it weird. How did what I drink make me more of a man or not? Wasn't I just a man because I was one? Still, somehow I felt bad. The waiter was back with our drinks and gone just as quickly. How's Lambert treating you? Asked Mr. Drew, picking up his glass and taking a sip. He closed his eyes and sighed. That's beautiful, he said to the drink. I sipped my Coke through a straw. Oh, she's swell, letting me work on cowboy bendy, I replied. Good, good. Well, if she gets too big for her britches, you let me know. She can be a handful, he replied. I didn't think that about her exactly. Just serious. Well, I believe you have great potential, buddy. I really do. I see how hard you work. The way you dash around the studio. Bet you see all kinds of things. He gave me a wink. Not really, sir. I just like getting the job done. I didn't exactly know what he meant by lots of things, but I took a long sip of Coke, trying to calm my tightening throat. It wasn't a lie, anyway. I hadn't seen anything, just heard things. Heard conversations. About machines, about ink. Mr. Drew leaned forward across the table, kind of like he was going to tell me a secret. You see anything interesting, or something you think I should know about? You let me know. Sure. Of course, then I felt like I should just tell him everything in that moment, especially about Tom and Sammy. But that would involve Dot, and she liked secrets. Felt that it was necessary. She had to have a good reason even if I didn't understand it. But in this quick moment, I just knew I couldn't tell him. Not yet. Good, said Mr. Drew. He leaned back as the waiter approached our table. Ready to order? He asked. I looked at the menu. I hadn't even opened yet. We'll have the steaks, medium rare, and don't skimp on the fingerling potatoes, announced Mr. Drew, handing back his menu. The waiter laughed like Mr. Drew had made the best joke he'd ever heard. And another, said Mr. Drew, tapping his empty glass. Another Coke for you, sir? Asked the waiter, turning to me. I was only half done with the one I had. Mr. Drew laughed. Come on, buddy, live a little. Okay, I told the waiter. Very good, sir. And he was gone in one of his swoops again. As we waited for the food, Mr. Drew started talking. I don't mean talking like we'd been having our conversation before, but talking. The way he had up in the theater. The way he had the day he hired me. I was starting to get used to it, listening to him go on. He had a lot of potential life philosophies. He had a need to share it. I could listen, even if I couldn't always understand what he was going on about. It's why I wrote the book. It's all an illusion, see? Life, living, it's all in here. He tapped at the side of his head and took a long sip of the new old-fashioned that had materialized in front of him. People think that there are rules, but rules are things that are man-made, trying to keep society in order. That's not bad, but it's also not something people like us have to worry about. He always did that, said us. I wasn't sure I was people like us, but I liked the sound of it. I don't get it, I replied. The steaks arrived just then, and I stared open-mouthed. I didn't mean to, and when the waiter laughed, I clamped my jaw shut, feeling embarrassed. But they were huge! The biggest pieces of meat I'd ever seen. This could have easily fed me, Ma, and Grandpa for one dinner. Looks fantastic, said Mr. Drew to the waiter, who beamed and then left. Then he turned to me and smiled. Don't be scared, buddy. Dig in. I'm not scared, I replied as I picked up my fork and knife, but honestly, I kind of was. I cut a piece and ate it. It was the most incredible taste I had in a very long time. Soft and juicy, just the right amount of flavoring. It seemed almost wrong that food could taste this good, and not everyone had the chance to experience it. No, not almost wrong. It was wrong. They say rules are meant to be broken, said Mr. Drew, chewing hard. But I say, why not rewrite the rules? Why break them when you can control them? It's all about having control over our own destinies. I nodded as I scooped up the potato. It tasted different. Had a zing to it. Horseradish, replied Mr. Drew without me having to ask. Amazing, isn't it? Yes, I replied with my mouth full. And then he went on. It was a dinner where Mr. Drew wanted to talk deep stuff I didn't really understand, and where all I wanted to do was to taste. I wanted to savor, keep it all in my memory. I barely listened to him, honestly. I heard the word vision again, and more stuff about illusions. But after his third old-fashioned, I was pretty sure even Mr. Drew wasn't really keeping up with what he was trying to say. By the time we hit the cheesecake for dessert, I didn't think my stomach could hold any more food. And I certainly didn't think my brain could hold any more of Mr. Drew's speeches. Finally, the marathon was over, and we were both leaning back in our chairs. Mr. Drew had stopped speaking. I had stopped eating. We both just kind of sat there, full. Now this is living, said Mr. Drew. Or a good illusion of it, I replied, not really thinking. But I guess all the stuff he'd been saying to me had managed to get into my brain somehow. Mr. Drew pointed at me and started to laugh. Hard. Harder than I'd ever seen anyone laugh before. He leaned forward and bent over and was laughing so hard, tears were coming out of his eyes, but the sound of laughter wasn't. Oh my! Oh, buddy, he said, wiping his face with a napkin. You're a good kid. A good one. I smiled too, though I felt more unnerved than anything. The waiter approached with a thin black book. Whenever you're ready, sir. He handed the book to Mr. Drew. Great. Yes. Buddy? Said Mr. Drew, extending his hand over the table. Yes? I asked. You have to sign the check over, he explained. I stared at him. He stared back. Then it hit me. I slowly pulled my paycheck from my pocket as the waiter handed me a pen. How much is it? I asked. Mr. Drew opened the little black book. With tip, let's say 15 even. I stared. $15 for one meal. Money comes with responsibility, buddy. That's how it works. Yes, sir, I stammered, still staring at the number. 15. Come on, kid, we both have places to be, said Mr. Drew. The tone of his voice had gotten serious now, almost annoyed. I slowly took the pen from the waiter and signed the back of the check. I handed it to him. Very good, sir, said the waiter. I'll bring you your change. I stared back at Mr. Drew, my heart pumping fast. I hoped he couldn't see the panic in my eyes. Now that's what I call a celebration, right, kid? He asked with a wide smile. Yes, sir, I replied softly. Now don't go spending like this every time you get your pay, he laughed. That's not responsible. Yes, sir, I said again. I could barely say the words. Mr. Drew looked over his shoulder. I could tell he was getting impatient. He sighed hard. Look, buddy, do you mind if I head back to the office? I'm meeting someone in half an hour. He was just leaving me? I mean, I guess why not, right? Dinner was done. I didn't need help getting home or anything. Oh, yeah, sure. Mr. Drew threw his napkin on the table and stood with a sharp nod. Excellent. Keep up the good work, kid. I'll see you tomorrow. And with that, it was his turn to swoop away, shaking hands with the waiter and the hostess as he left. Everyone laughing. I really didn't know what was so funny. Your change, sir, said the waiter, coming over and handing me the little black book. Thanks. I opened it. $25 cash. It was still a lot of money, but it had been more. Much more. I shoved the bills into my pocket and got out of the restaurant as fast as I could. Took the subway home, keeping my hand in my pocket. Didn't need anyone swiping the rest. I got home just as Ma was clearing the table. Grandpa smiled at me from the sink and waved a soapy hand in my direction. Buddy, thought you'd be home for dinner, Ma said when she saw me. Me too, I replied. Buck up, buddy. You can't let them know how guilty you're feeling. I looked at the dusty curtain, the pile of dirty dishes, the old daybed that Ma slept on. Nope, that wasn't helping the guilt. Mr. Drew took me out to celebrate. I got paid today. Finally, said Ma. She smiled at me. I was getting worried. Yeah, me too. Anyway, here. I quickly put the pile of crumpled bills on the table. Oh, wow, buddy, said Ma, staring at it. That made me swallow hard. Yeah, $25. It'll be more, though, now that he trusts me. A lie. It'll be more now that I won't be having any fancy dinners. It's all yours. Ma picked up the cash carefully, smoothing out each dollar. She held out a 10 for me to take. You need something. New clothes. Maybe take one of your new friends for a piece of pie. I wanted to run away. I was so ashamed. No, Ma, please, not this time. Maybe next time, I said. And then I went to my room as fast as I could, hid inside. My heart wasn't racing, but it was hurting. It was kind of a shame I'd never felt before. I was so angry at myself, and at the world too. All those people in that restaurant, they could all afford to eat there, weren't having an episode because of one meal. It wasn't fair. It just wasn't fair. Never again, I told myself. Not until at least I could afford it, actually. Not till I could take Ma, buy her a fancy dress. Take Grandpa too, of course. Get him a new suit, a new long-sleeve shirt since he liked them so much. Never again. Until... So that was the end of chapter 10. What did you think? Did you enjoy it? If so, feel free to leave your comments, like the video, and share it around if you want me to continue. Thanks so much for watching. This is GlowPOP Artisan, or the Apple Lady, signing off. And as always, I will see you in the next video. Stay safe and stay sweet, my apples. Ciao!